like I was telling you, my dad's a tribal councilman, and he's really never took notice in anything like Indian language. And since I started the kids into Topney School, was mostly basically because I wanted them to learn the Indian language. And when I took them, and just like Hazel said, they really caught on. Kids really catch on when they want to learn. And my dad always had a habit of calling the youngest girl little animal names. And one time he called her an animal name, and she turned around and she called him a skunk in Indian. And he turned around and he asked, where is she learning all these things? And I told him that they were going to school in Topnish now, and where they were was they were teaching Indian language. And this is where she was learning the animal names, because he called her another name and she called him, I think it was a horse. And he really took notice in that, because he said, she's never called me anything like that, because he's always called her animals' names, and she's starting to call him back different animals. And he said what kind of program this was, and I told him that it was that Indian language that Hazel Umtich was teaching. And he said she was there just a little while and she learned all that. And I said it didn't take very long for her to learn. Only thing was I told him that we only get the kids half an hour. And he said, why half an hour? Why don't you get them an hour? And I said, well, that's just how they got the program set. It's just half an hour.
Do you think that you'd be able to do more with the kids if you had them for an hour or so?
I think we teach them a lot more in an hour. Like Hazel said, we're thinking of teaching them how to read out sentences in Indian and write out sentences. And I think really we could teach them a lot more in an hour than we do in a half an hour. Seem like we just get them in a room and then they're out and they're disappointed because they have to leave.
Okay. Okay. Now can you just tell me your name and your position and a little bit about the program that you work in?
My name is Lena So Happy Sakasnai Owens, and my enrollment number is 2545. As I understand, lately we've been given our numbers every time I go to a store. What is your enrollment number? So I have to give my number. And I've been employed at White Swan School for about 6 years now, and I have learned to write our Indian language for about 10 to 12 years. I took lessons from Dr. Rigsby. He's a linguistic teacher in University in New Mexico. And I also was taught by the late Alex Saluskin. That's where I got all my lessons from.
What do you do in the public school system?
In the public school,
What is this? You can be quiet and stay in here, or you can go outside. Okay?
I've been doing most of the language in Indian when I first started for White Swan. I've taught it just orally, and the students that I had was from grade through, first through high school. And this year, since we have most of our books, and since I also know how to write the Indian language, and I've been using most of these and given the students in written form in classrooms this year. And most of the high school students and also the grade school students enjoy writing the Indian language instead of just listening to me and using it orally.
When you talk about the students, are these mostly Indian students, or are they part Indian and part non-Indian?
Well, I have them all mixed because I have them from K through 12. So they all enjoy the lessons that I have. I only don't teach them the language. I also teach them our religion in the valley, such as the Shakers, the Washat, and also the medicine dances. I relay these lessons to them also because I don't want the students, all the students, to forget everything, such as our faith throughout the valley.
What do you think the value is of teaching young Indian people about their history? Why is it important to do that?
To me, I always think that the teaching should fall on the parents first, then the children, because there's a lot of parents that don't understand anything throughout the valley. And here we're starting our teaching from the children when it should be through the parents first.
But what value does it have for an Indian boy or an Indian girl who is going to grow up, who may want to live in what is essentially white society? Why is it important for that child to know about his own history and his own heritage and his own language?
It's for them to know what they are, because many a times the students today, they don't know who they are really until I started teaching the Indian language. Then they wondered how come they didn't know their Indian language before. And right away it relays back to their parents. When the student want to know more, they have no one to turn to when they get home and want to find out more. So this way, I always think it's best to bring the parents in as well as the students. That way they would all understand together and be a better, happier family at home.
How do you bring the parents into this program? Do you use them as resources, or how?
But sometimes I use resource, like I used Mrs. Yellup as a resource person first part of December, and she brought in all her Indian artifacts, and it was very interesting for her to bring these things because what I had all burnt in a fire. And she brought her cedar root bowls that the old Indian people used to use, and pestles, how we used to grind our food. And it was very interesting for some of those older students because they've never seen them before. And she had beadwork and old Indian dresses and cuppin, we call cuppin digging iron, that we use when we go gather roots in the spring. She had all of these, and when it was time for her to go with me to Hera, to the grade school, we couldn't carry all of these articles that she had, so she just brought in the berry baskets and the anai that we use for gathering our roots, and cuppin, the digging iron that we use for digging our roots. And each time we went to the classes, she showed them how we use these berry baskets and how we use the cuppin to gather our food with, and we also showed them how we dry our roots and berries.
So you think this Yakima language class and the cultural kinds of things that you do in the class have a good effect?
Yes,
on
it
the young
does.
people?
Yes.
What kinds of advantages do you think it gives them?
It makes them understand more why we go to the mountains in the springtime and why we stay up there as long as we do sometimes, and why we gather huckleberries during the fall time. And all of these things were very interesting to some of the students because they've never done this before. Some of them, they just drive around up there and they see the roots, but they don't know what they are. And in the spring, when the roots are ready after our root feast, that's when I take the students up to the hills to gather roots and show them which is edible and which isn't edible.
Would you like to see this program continued and expanded? Do you think
Yes.
it would be a good thing to have more than one teacher here?
Yes, I would like to have it expanded more, and I would like to have more of our ladies and even the men to teach our children in schools more, because there's many of our Indian people that does know how to talk Indian, but they don't use it. It hasn't really faded. We still use it.
Okay, I'd like to move the camera up behind you now and let you show me some of those materials that they've drawn. Okay.
We have 39 different sounds in our Indian alphabet. There's a short A vowel and a double A long vowel, because our Indian words all differs in our speaking. We have a barred I. A barred I means that it's a silent sound, like in English word you use no, K-N-O-W. You don't hear the K in that word. So this is the same in barred I. And we have 8 different kinds of sounds in K's. There's a hard sound and a glottalized stop K sound, and a soft KW sound and a hard back KW sound, and also a hard front KW sound with a little glottalized stop sound on it, and the hard back underlined K sound. This is a very difficult sound because my students has a hard time saying this word, like in the word knees. We say it qokhl. You have all that hard glottalized sound in it, the underlined K, the underlined X, and the barred L sound. So there's a lot of difference in K there, like this KW, hard back KW, that has an underlined K and a glottal stop after the W, like in the word nuqash. You can hear the difference from, as I haven't been given them the alphabet as I do now. And this is a book I use always. I've been using in high school mostly. The little phrases that we use every day. Most of the teachers will ask a student to write their name. So this is how this book is written. Wanikt is for name, Timak is for write, Wanikshash means my name is. So this week I've been telling them, if you know the word Timak to write and the word name, Wanikt, just put those two words together. Timak Wanikt means a whole sentence. Write your name. And when you are speaking to your friend, you asking them Shin Nam Waniksha, which goes along in this book. And also the greeting words. I was told by an elderly person, never say Sheikh Skoipa, you're supposed to say Sheikh Maitzki. So I've been correcting this page too to my students. You're supposed to say Sheikh Maitzki, that means good morning. So we have all of these alphabetical words in these sentences as I am teaching to my students. Wanaqit, Monday, Naplqui, Tuesday, Matalqui, Wednesday, Pinaplqui, Thursday, Pachalqui, Friday, Tamatzakt, Saturday. And when I write these on a board for this, Lamt is blue, Chmuk is black, Makhl is yellow, Machas is orange. So all of these, the student.
Okay, everybody quiet. Now I understand that you are the only certified teacher of the Yakima language in the
I
whole
believe,
world.
I believe I am.
Mhm.
I was just as much surprised as anybody else, I think, because I've studied to write my Indian language, as I've said it before, about 10 to 12 years now, and it was very hard struggle for me to learn all of this alphabets in Indian, because our Indian language has never been written before. And as I've been telling you before, I should have continued on working on it harder when I first learned to write it. When I first learned to write this Indian words, it was just the way it sounded to me, and I used to write it for my sister when she was working for Wapato summer classes. And that's where I first started to write it. And from that time on, it's just been growing on me ever since. And I was very surprised when I was told to go to the Indian Agency last summer for some gathering or meeting. No one told me what it was all about. And a friend came and she bought me a nice new outfit and fixed it all up for me. And I got ready and we went over there. And all the time the surprise was on me. That's when I received my Indian language certificate to teach the Indian words to the children. And as long as I've grown up, I've talked Indian. Now that both of my parents are deceased, I'm deep down in my heart thankful towards them that they never made me forget my language.
Very nice. Okay, I'm just going to ask you to give your name and the position that you hold and describe the program that you're working on.
All right.
Briefly.
Okay. My name is Jean. Briefly. Excuse me.
It's okay.
All right, I won't talk too long. My name is Jean Thomas, and I'm employed as the director of the Consortium of Johnson O'Malley Committees, Region 4, and it is an office that is established by parent committees from throughout the Yakima Reservation. They represent 9 school districts. They are the board of the directors, and they are the ones that tell me the kind of work that I should be doing from day to day.
Okay, very good. What are the goals of your program, and specifically who does it serve?
The goals of the program are to cooperate amongst parents from all the school districts in the reservation for the benefit of the children from district to district. Some districts are bigger than others, and so they found that by cooperating with each other and sharing with each other, that they get more value out of the dollars that they have to spend to organize their programs for the kids in the school.
How did this program get started, and how is it funded?
It got started through a lot of dedication and a lot of struggling. The parents decided that they wanted to be together and they wanted to talk to each other about the programs and what could be done. And so they got a lot of static from different people in authorities, schools, other Indians, state officials, and it was hard for them to get themselves recognized as a nonprofit organization. It took them 2 years, but it did finally happen in March of 1973. And so now that they're a legal nonprofit organization, their budget has grown from about $3,000 to $150,000 in 3 years.
And the funding comes from?
They have money from different places. They get a lot of strong support from the Tribal Council, especially for their language programs that they've developed. And so the Tribal Council really backs them, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Johnson O'Malley money, Office of Education, and Title IV Indian Education as their sources right now. Plus also the Center for Applied Linguistics is giving them some money from the National Endowment for Humanities. It kind of flows through money.
What's your involvement in the program?
My involvement? Well, I really feel fortunate that I am involved because I feel that working here that you can really focus and emphasize on some of the more true work that needs to be done in regards to culture. And so as the director, it's my responsibility, like I said, to follow through on the parents' ideas. And they set the priorities, and the priorities that they've set is, number one, I think, really goes to academics because they want their children to be educationally proficient. But then there's kind of a side-by-side number one priority because they also have first priority on language, restoring the language so that everybody can speak Yakima fluently. And they've really concentrated a lot on that. And another thing that, well, they've kind of built on a sequence, I guess is a way of putting it. And so they started out by doing this book, and there's 53 people.
Can I stop you for a minute because I'll change the tape, and then you can catch right up on talking about
Right,
the book.
I'll start out
All
with a
right.
close-up on the book.
Well, like I was telling you, my dad's a tribal councilman, and he's really never took notice in anything like Indian language. And since I started the kids into taught me school, was mostly basically because I wanted them to learn the Indian language. And when I took them, and just like Hazel said, they really caught on. Kids really catch on when they want to learn. And my dad always had a habit of calling the youngest girl little animal names. And one time he called her an animal name, and she turned around and she called him a skunk in Indian. And he turned around and he asked, where is she learning all these things? And I told him that they were going to school in Topnish now, and where they were teaching Indian language. And this is where she was learning the animal names, because he called her another name and she called him, I think it was a horse. And he really took notice in that, because he said, and I said, well, that's just how they got the program set, it's just half an hour.
Do you think that you'd be able to do more with the kids if you had them for an hour or so?
I think we teach them a lot more in an hour. Like Hazel said, we're thinking of teaching them how to read out sentences in Indian and write out sentences. And I think really we could teach them a lot more in an hour than we do in a half an hour. Seem like we just get them in the room and then they're out. She's never called me anything like that, because he's always called her animals' names, and she's starting to call him back different animals. And he said what kind of program this was, and I told him that it was that Indian language that Hazel Umtich was teaching. And he said she was there just a little while and she learned all that. And I said it didn't take very long for her to learn. Only thing was I told him that we only get the kids half an hour. And he said, why half an hour? Why don't you get them an hour out? And they're disappointed because they have to leave.
Okay. Okay. Now can you just tell me your name and your position and a little bit about the program that you work in?
My name is Lena So Happy Sakasnai Owens, and my enrollment number is 2545. As I understand lately we've been given our numbers every time I go to a store.